Okay, we are recording. Good. Oh, man, it's been a long week. This video is going up kind of late because I've been really busy doing the reading for my coursework and taking care of my family, trying to prepare for this video. So I apologize for it going up late. Um, last week, last video, total brain fart there. Sorry, I'm running on very few hours of sleep. Our baby kept us up last night. I remember what we talked about last week. Self-worth. That's right. I keep getting, whether we did the self-worth video or the recognizing patterns of a toxic relationship. I was like, which one did I do last? So, as you guys know, I'm just a regular guy who feels strongly about this topic and has the opportunity to share my testimony with you about the principles of the Family Proclamation to the world, issued by the prophet and apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 1994. And we are applying those principles to individuals and couples struggling in a toxic relationship, whether you think you are in a toxic relationship or you know you are, um, or you're not sure at all whether you are. And even if you're not in a toxic relationship, the principles taught here can apply to you and help you to develop into a better person and be able to become the kind of person that can have a happy, lifelong, and eternal marriage. And what I want to talk about this week, um, building off of what we talked about last week with understanding who you are and what your worth is, the next step is to start evaluating your part in enabling some of these toxic behaviors, taking personal accountability and standing up for yourself um, against that toxic person, to establish boundaries and to recognize where your actions need to change. It's not all on them. Oftentimes, individuals who are in a toxic relationship find themselves in the role of an enabler. What is an enabler? Um, that's what we're going to talk about today, recognizing habits and patterns of behavior, give some examples of what an enabler is versus someone that is supporting their spouse in a healthy way, in the way that is appropriate to the Lord. I just realized the one source I forgot to pull up was the actual Family Proclamation of the World this week. That is my bad. I am actually using a different computer this week because I my regular computer has been giving me some issues with um, being able to access the internet, which is unfortunate. This is why is it not zooming? So I apologize for the delay while I try to figure out how this computer works and why it won't zoom in on the Family Proclamation here is beyond me. This is the one from view image. Well, I guess we'll have to go with this. All right, let's share screen and get started looking at the resources this week. There we go. All right, so here we are in the Family Proclamation of the World. And what principle are we focusing on this week? We are focusing on in here where it talks about the roles of father and mother. By divine design, fathers are to preside over their families in love and righteousness, and are responsible to provide the necessities of life and protection for their families. Mothers are primarily responsible for the nurture of their children. In these sacred responsibilities, fathers and mothers are obligated to help one another as equal partners. And um, it talks about disability, death, or other circumstances may necessitate individual adaptation. Extended families should lend support while needed. So we are to support one another as equal partners. We've talked about that concept before. But sometimes in a relationship, one person may find themselves being all the support and um, inappropriately, not like it is inappropriate for one person to be bearing all of the burden the of the relationship. So let's go here to some articles um, that have um, been sourced from the internet. This is information that you can find on your own. I never want to use a resource that you can't go and read yourself, but I do try to find reputable sources um, that have been written by or at least quoting actual research done on this topic and experts in the field. Um, so let's look at signs or characteristics of an enabler. So these signs can help you recognize the pattern of enabling behavior um, that it may have developed. So ignoring or tolerating problematic behavior. Even if you personally disagree with a loved one's behavior, you might ignore it for any number of reasons. Um, if you if you love if you believe your loved one is looking for attention, you might hope ignoring the behavior will remove the intent to continue. You might avoid talking about it because you're afraid of acknowledging the problem. You or your loved one might not have accepted that there's a problem. You might even be afraid of what your loved one will say or do if you challenge the behavior. Um, Now let's go to another one. 6 signs that yes, you are the enabler in a toxic relationship. Um, I'm looking for the one that relates to that. Nope, not there. Perhaps it wasn't in this article. I read several articles and I only chose a few um, to use. So here's an example of this behavior. Say your partner struggles with alcohol misuse. They say they haven't been drinking, but you find a receipt in the bathroom trash for a liquor stolen night. Next night, you find a receipt for a bar in your neighborhood. Instead of asking them about the receipts, you decide not to press the issue. If you're a enabler, you might be ignoring the bad behavior of your significant other, um, or you might be tolerating it, putting up with it, and you know what, it's not that bad. It could be worse, or I've seen him worse, or I've seen her doing worse. This level isn't that bad. I can work with this. We can get through this. These are all thoughts of someone that's ignoring and tolerating problematic behavior and justifying why they're not doing something about it and confronting the other person. And yeah, confronting somebody can be hard. And that's why we talked about making sure that you understand your worth and what you deserve in life. You are a son or daughter of a Heavenly Father, and you have the potential to become just like Him, and you are an heir of all that He has possessed. And you should stand up for yourself in receiving that and being respected and not being the one to bear all the burdens in a relationship. So don't ignore problematic behavior. Bring it up to the person and commit them to a change. And if they're not willing to change, then that's something that you need to take into consideration, and perhaps the relationship needs to come to an end. But again, we'll be talking about whether to save or leave a relationship in later videos. Another example of an enabler is providing financial assistance. There's no harm in helping out a loved one financially from time to time. So everybody needs some help sometimes. But if you find yourself constantly funding somebody's um, habits, or they're coming to you for money, I just need this week, and I promise I'll pay you back, or come on, just help me out. Or if you're in a committed relationship and you are the one handling all of the finances. You are the one who works and earns all of the income, or um, even if the other is working and earning income, you are the one who is in charge of taking care of all of the bills and things with your income, and they use their income uh, for fun, for games, for their addictions or bad behaviors, and they spend it all on themselves. Or in the rare case, sometimes they spend it on you, but they're not contributing to the relationship. Um, this is especially common in relationships where one person has a drug addiction or a pornography addiction, um, or a hobby that they are too much invested in, that's taking up an inappropriate, inordinate amount of time. Um, you may find yourself funding their projects or being the one that has to take care of all the financial worries of the relationship. So another example, your adult child struggles to manage their money and never has enough to pay their rent. Having them out each month won't teach them how to manage their money. Instead, they may be becoming more dependent on you. We're going to continue to talk about this as we go on, but an enabler, what they're doing is allowing the bad behavior to continue, um, and removing from that person that they're enabling the ability to subsist on their own. So other examples of behavior of an enabler: covering for them or making excuses. They're they're drunk. Say your significant other has that problem with alcohol and they're drunk, and you call in to work for them, and make an excuse that they're sick, or you find yourself justifying their behavior to others, especially in cases where someone else points out to you and is trying to show you that you're in a toxic relationship, and that you are, and they're saying, like, look at this behavior and how it's affecting you, and you defend that person to those people and say, it's not that bad, it's just part of our relationship, I know that he loves me, or I know that she, loves me, and you justify their behavior to others, you make excuses for them, you're enabling them and keeping them from facing the consequences of their bad behavior, and also lying to yourself about it. A lot of times, enablers think that they're trying to help their loved one, that they're being compassionate by removing those negative consequences, or by looking past these behaviors. Um, but that's actually hurting the other person, and in the process hurting you. You are taking on yourself more burden than you should be taking on. Um, and another thing, don't lie to yourself about your significant other's bad behaviors. And because it is affecting you, and it is, and deep down it's building up, and you don't want to snap and do something irrational, when there's a straw that breaks the camel's back. And it's not okay that that person is doing that to you. So here's some examples of this behavior. You might call your partner, oh, I already used that example, um, without even thinking about it. Um, Taking on more than your share of responsibilities. We've talked about this. You might find yourself being the one taking care of finances, or you're the only one that's doing housework. When we talked about my friend, we called her Amy, her experience with Chad, she would ask him to do simple things like vacuum or do the dishes, and then she would go to work and come back and find that he had not done those things, and she would end up doing them every time. She was always the one taking care of the household chores, and that's not okay. This should be a shared responsibility, especially in those essential day-to-day activities of cleaning, like cleaning the house, uh, cleaning your laundry, your dishes, of taking care of kids if you have kids together. Um, these should be shared responsibilities. We read in the Proclamation that husband and wife should support each other as equal partners. Now, equal does not mean same, as we talked about, but it means that you share the responsibilities and you share the rewards and the blessings of your using your mutual talents and strengths to support each other where the other has weaknesses. Um, Now, then we also have avoiding the issue. This kind of ties back to um, ignoring or tolerating problematic behavior. You avoid um, the issue. You just don't bring it up because you're afraid of what they will say. You don't want to start a conflict, and often enablers are individuals that have a fear of conflict, and you're afraid to start an argument or to bring up a point that you want to change and hold your ground on it. Some conflict in marriage is healthy, especially when it's about improving the relationship and improving individuals within the relationship and setting healthy boundaries on what kind of behavior is or isn't okay in your relationship. And there are certain behaviors that are just inherently not okay in a healthy, happy relationship and marriage, um, because they are inherently detrimental uh, to that relationship. Things such as drinking, especially heavy drinking, um, pornography use, or related to that, and further than that, having affairs, um, hitting another person, abuse, and also as we've talked about, anything on this list, not sharing responsibilities, um, brushing things off. We've talked about kind of, people let you know about something that's going on and you refuse to acknowledge it, or you see this pattern of behavior happening over and over and over, and you tell yourself that it's not so bad and they wouldn't do those things if it weren't for their addiction. Say, he wouldn't yell at me and hit me if he wasn't drinking, or he wouldn't be sleeping around, or she wouldn't be sleeping around if they didn't have a pornography addiction. But the reason for the behavior doesn't really matter. If the behavior causes harm, it causes harm. Minimizing the issue implies to your loved one that they can continue to treat you similarly with no consequences. That, like we said, you're allowing that behavior to continue. By pretending that it doesn't affect you, you give the message that they aren't doing something that's a problem. Um, Denying the problem is along those same lines. Um, Sacrificing or struggling to recognize your own needs. For this one, I want to go to over here to this other article. You consistently put your partner's needs before your own. Now, that sounds like charity. It sounds like love. It sounds like, sacrificing a relationship. Like, I set aside myself to serve this other person. I'm relinquishing my wants and desires so that they can be happy. But that can be carried to an extreme, especially if it's a one-sided sacrificing. In a codependent relationship, the enabler focuses on the feelings and needs of the other partner, usually at the expense of their own, said Andrea Watcher, a marriage and family therapist in Northern California. While it may make them feel good about themselves, sanely even, it's not healthy. In solid relationships, each person factors in their own truth and their own needs, she said. But people can only do this if they feel worthy of having needs, which again ties back to our last video, recognizing your self-worth. Um, if you're somebody watching this video that hasn't watched any of my previous videos, please go watch the video on your self-worth and your eternal identity as a son or daughter of God. Because understanding and recognizing, and more importantly, internalizing and believing that truth is the foundation for beginning to make change in your life and in your relationship. Um, to change this dynamic, Watcher recommends that enablers get in the habit of saying no, or at least waiting to make a decision. Um, you know, Amy, my friend, talked about the experiences he had with Chad, where he would, he liked it when she dressed up, but he told her not to go out um, by herself that way. Um, and that was infringing upon her needs. She found herself sacrificing her need to be able to dress up and feel pretty and feel good about herself, do those things of investing in her appearance and to bring out the best in herself. Um, he was trying to tell her that she couldn't do that because he had this need not to feel like other guys were hitting on her, and he was jealous of other guys, and that's not okay for him to ask, and it's also not okay for her to say, okay, I won't do that. I won't dress up and feel good about myself, um, and invest in my own self-image. Other examples of that are, you put all of your, we talked about earlier, like you're taking on all the responsibility of finances and things so that they can go and have fun. Um, a spouse who plays video games all day and doesn't take care of the house or the kids while their significant other or their spouse is taking care of all those things, um, they are putting, that spouse that's taking care of everything is putting the partner's needs or wants in that case, but before their own. And that's not okay. You need to step up and demand that equal treatment and equal responsibility be taken. Let's continue going through this list. Um, Not following through on consequences. Now this is important because sometimes you will stand up for yourself. I don't doubt that you stood up for yourself in this situation and you've asked for change, and the other person has committed to change, and they've made that small effort that we talked about previously that toxic people tend to, they'll do the little bit of work to try to get things back to normal, um, pacify you, and then they'll fall right back into that pattern. If you state a consequence for that behavior, like, if you don't stop this, I'm no longer going to be around you, or if you don't stop playing video games all the time and start helping, then I'm going to get rid of your video game system, and you don't follow through on that, they're going to keep doing it. You're telling them that it's not really that big a deal and that you're not actually committed to them making a change, and to holding them to that. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. You keep crying wolf and saying that there's going to be consequences and then never follow through on that, then eventually it just falls on deaf ears. Um, and it'll make it more likely that they'll continue to behave in the same way and keep taking advantage of you. So, example, there may come a time in your relationship where you've had enough. You might say, if you spend this money on anything other than rent, I'm not going to give you any more money. We talked about giving too much financial assistance. Or I can't stay in this relationship if you don't get professional help. But if you don't follow through, your loved one continues doing what they're doing and learns that these are empty threats. So don't make empty threats. Be committed. And I would suggest, in helping you with this, let somebody else know that you have issued a consequence to your significant other. And this is part of, we'll talk about as we continue to discuss this issue, building a strong support system. One of the lines here in the Family Proclamation to the world is extended families should lend support when needed. One of the things that toxic people will tend to do is cut you off from support people, the people who would tell you that their behavior is bad or that would be helping you, and they want you to rely solely on them so that they can have power and control over you. So make sure you have a support system. Reach out to somebody, tell them, hey, I told so-and-so that, if they don't change this behavior, I'm going to do this. I want you to follow up with me in a few days or in a given time period and find out if their behavior changed or not, and whether or not I followed through on the consequence, and encourage me and remind me that I committed to follow through on this consequence. Having somebody to help you build your accountability is a strong resource that you can have. And that brings us again to boundaries. Being accountable to your boundaries. If they're breaking boundaries and you've given consequence for breaking those boundaries and you don't follow through, then their boundaries aren't even there. It's like drawing a line in the sand versus building a wall in Berlin. One is easily crossable and holds almost no consequence, and that line can be blurred. Whereas when there's a wall, in order to cross through, you have to meet the requirements given. Um, and it's okay to set boundaries such as, I don't want to be around you when you're shouting. I'll only listen to you when you talk calmly. I don't feel comfortable having sex if you've been drinking. I don't want to hang out with you when you've been doing drugs, so please don't come over when you're high. Or I don't want to be the only one taking care of the kids. When the kids are home, you're not allowed to play video games. These are good examples. Um, enablers, all of this is eventually going to lead you to feeling resentment. The more you continue this pattern of allowing the other person to continue this behavior, the more it's going to hurt you, and you're likely to develop resentment and anxiety and fear towards that person, which continues the cycle of perpetuating that behavior. And when you get to that point where it's like, I'm going to leave and I want something to change, and you snap, and then they make those little concessions and try to get things back to normal and pacify you, you're just, that resentment just, they'll pacify and then it'll build up, and then you'll break and they'll pacify you and it'll build up, and you'll break and they'll pacify you, and it just goes around and around and around, until you commit to making that change and making them change. And toxic relationships are more than just, couple relationships. Toxic relationships can happen with family, such in this example where your sister continues to leave her kids with you when she goes out. She says she has a job, but you know she's lying. You agree to babysit because you want the kids to be safe, but your babysitting enables her to keep going out and doing things. It's especially hard in a family relationship to stand up for yourself, because you might feel trapped in that home, that place. Um, but you are worth standing up for, and nobody's going to stand up for you except for you until you stand up for yourself and start getting yourself a support system. So here's that other article, 6 signs that yes, you are the enabler in a relationship. We already talked about you consistently put your partner's needs before your own. Another one is you apologize too much. If you find yourself saying sorry for every little thing that your significant other criticizes you for, making concessions um, all too often, then you are apologizing too much. Your connection to that person is not more important than your self-worth. Um, and they aren't going to see that. They're going to try to keep you in their power and blame you for things and try to keep power over you. And when you start to say no and develop boundaries, they're going to fight back. I want you to be prepared for this. There is going to be a kickback. In the Book of Mormon, we read when Nephi is talking to his brothers, who there was a toxic relationship there. His brothers were not keeping the commandments. They were very cynical. They were very whiny and complaining. They never wanted to do anything unless they saw the direct benefit to themselves. And when Nephi would teach them, they would get mad at him and angry at him. And there were times that they tried to kill him. One time they tied him up and tried to leave him in the wilderness. Another time they tied him to the mast of the boat that they were using to cross to the promised land. And eventually they did put it into their hearts to just do the deed themselves and kill him. And the Lord warned Nephi, and he was able to escape with his family and separated from them. And he wrote in the scriptures why this is. He said, "The wicked taketh the truth to be hard, for it pierceth them to their very soul." And elsewhere in the scriptures, it talks about the Holy Ghost, the Spirit, piercing us to the core and causing our hearts to burn. And especially when we are doing things that are not right, the Holy Ghost will tell us, and we'll feel uncomfortable. And as you start to stand up for what is right and demand change from the toxic person in your life, they're going to resent it, and they're going to act out even more, and they may make threats to you to try to keep you in their power. and they may follow through on those threats. They may try to hurt you, and if that's the case, then you definitely need to get out of that situation. Um, if your safety is on the line, get out of the situation. Um, whether or not you want to try to save the relationship once you put some distance between you and that person is up to you, and we'll talk about that more in later videos. But you need to get away from that person if they're making threats to you. Um, if it's just general, discomfort and they're complaining and not wanting to change, but they're not, being aggressive, then, continue. Then you don't have to get out of that situation as much, but they will just know that there will be pushback. Um, and as we were talking about, if you apologize too much, don't say sorry for bringing up issues and for standing your ground and for bringing up problems. When you can't let a problem remain unresolved, it leads to concessions you wouldn't otherwise make. A more productive step would be to channel all that energy into self-care and boundary setting. Um, as an enabler in a relationship, you might think that no one can handle this person better than you, that you are uniquely suited because you understand them better than anybody else. And this goes back to talking about, enabling their behavior um, every time, making it worse because you're justifying and things. And the relationship will never seem to get better. If you're an enabler, you may be trying and they may be saying they'll be making changes, and then it just keeps going back. Um, and no amount of accommodating, soothing, or solving can change anything if your partner is not willing to change. Remember, you can't do it all. To make inroads in changing this pattern, um, Deverich says to give your partner an opportunity to fix problems as they come. Deverich is another um, Amanda Deverich, a marriage and family therapist in Williamsburg, Virginia. If you feel like your life revolves around your partner, that this is where we were talking about that they will cut you off from support people. Everywhere you go, they will want to be, or they won't want you to be anywhere where they are not. As we talked about with Amy and Chad, he didn't want her going out with friends, dressed up nice because he was afraid of somebody else hitting on her. It was controlling, and they might try to keep you from your friends and family, or they might put down when you bring up things that you want to do. None of your ideas are ever supported. You might suggest an activity for you guys to do together, and they put it down. Even if they then later suggest that same activity, um, because it's their idea. Um, there's that classic trope that you see in comedies where somebody will propose an idea, and then the person next to them will propose the same idea, and everybody will praise that second person for the idea, even though it was the first person's idea. That's a toxic situation, um, and that represents an imbalance of power. And another thing is, to some extent, you might see this other person as helpless. We've talked about a lot of giving to them, taking responsibility for them, making excuses for them. And all this might come from you don't see them as able to handle these things on their own. But they are fully capable of doing it. They were able to do it before you came into their life, and they'll be able to do it afterwards. And they'll be able to do it if you stand up and you refuse to do things for them. You'll find that people will take care of themselves, especially when nobody else is going to. But if you continue to take care of them, a toxic person who is being enabled will let you do it for them, and they will not help you. And it's at the end of the day, it's important to remember that not all helpful gestures are truly helpful. So we've talked a lot about enabling, which is bad. But what is a good form of being there for your partner and supporting them? What is the difference between supporting and enabling? So here's an article from Psych Central um, by a psychology major who is also a marriage and family therapist and has several other qualifications. Um, it's human nature to help and want to help someone that you care for. Um, but there's a line between supportive and enabling. So what is the difference between supporting and enabling? Simply stated, supporting or helping includes assisting with things that the person truly is incapable of doing for him or herself, or doing things that help facilitate them gaining control of their behaviors in life. Enabling, on the other hand, um, enabling behaviors, on the other hand, keep someone from dealing with negative consequences of their actions. So supporting someone is going to be, things that they truly can't do for themselves. A very simple but almost silly example is reaching something that's up high for somebody that can't reach it. In that case, they're incapable of doing it. Could they go get a stool? Yes. But is it nice for you to reach up and grab it for them? Yes. But now if they demand that you get it for them every time and they refuse to go get a stool and do it themselves, then it's become enabling. But I want to focus on the other half of that definition of supporting. Doing things that help facilitate them gaining control of their behaviors in life. This is where the true difference is. Let's take the example that we've talked about. Say your partner has an alcoholic addiction, they're an alcoholic, and you want to help them change. Behaviors that would facilitate helping them change would be setting a boundary that no alcohol is allowed in the house, um, facilitating that they cannot drink at home. Another example would be insisting that they go to AA and begin participating in such meetings and find themselves a sponsor, or you will leave. That is a behavior that you are doing that you can control that is focused on facilitating them gaining control of their behavior. Now you may be saying, but maybe they won't do it. What if they choose not to? What if they won't change? That's okay. You can control you. You can't control them, and you should stop trying to. You can't change that person. They have to want it and choose it for themselves. We've talked about agency in previous videos. Moral agency is the freedom that the Lord has given us to choose right from wrong. For behold, men are free to choose liberty and eternal life. Sorry, I gotta plug in the computer or it's gonna die. To the great mediator of all men, or to choose captivity and death according to the captivity and power of the devil. For he seeketh that all men might be miserable like unto himself. This is a scripture from the book of Alma in the Book of Mormon. We are free to choose liberty or captivity. And if a person chooses to remain a captive by not making behaviors, or by not changing their behavior and doing things to get free of alcohol, you can't control that. You can control your freedom and choose not to link yourself to that person and allow their captivity to keep you captive as well. And you are facilitating their choice by giving them an incentive. Like if they want you to stay, they want to be with you, then they need to change. Your behavior is facilitating them making changes. So that's just one example of what it means to support. Um, Enablers often try to solve the problems for the people they're trying to help. Solving their problems makes the enabler feel as though they are doing something good for the person they care about. We've talked about that. And that's where I got that, is from this article. But the truth is, you are hurting them. Enabling behavior that needs to change will also create a negative dynamic in the relationship. The person needing help becomes unable to live their life in a healthy, independent, and responsible manner, and therefore becomes dependent on others. The enabler then takes on responsibilities, but they're not truly theirs. This can ultimately result in and create resentment in the enabler and a very unhealthy, unbalanced relationship overall. So, here are some questions, if you're wondering whether you're being helpful or enabling, to ask yourself. Do you find yourself making excuses? Do you regularly put your own needs second because somebody else needs your attention? This is normal if you're a parent for your child um, that's too young to care for themselves. But in an adult or in children that are older and able to care for themselves in many ways, that's not healthy. Do you have a feeling or know full well that the behavior you're seeing is unhealthy or irresponsible? Have you ever lied for that person? Or do you routinely lie for them? If you've answered yes to any of these, you may be enabling behaviors that need to change. So what should you do? In a word, stop. In the words of, put it as Elder Dieter F. Uchtdorf has said, sorry, his name was escaping me. Stop it. Stop it now. But that sounds easier than it actually is. As I mentioned before, you probably care about this person and you want to help them. It's human nature to want to serve others. In fact, that's our divine nature, is to be selfless and other focused. But when that goes to extremes, we become an enabler and not a supporter. So you may need to become the parent who makes the child explain to their teacher why their assignment isn't done and accept that poor grade for it. Or the spouse who calls um, the hangover alcohol abuse and insists on change. Or the partner that requires selfish behavior to stop and insists on balance in the relationship. These roles are not easy, and you may find that you need help yourself in enacting them. But by putting a stop to the enabling behavior, however, you will ultimately make a true difference in someone's life. You will help them live a self-sufficient and healthy way. So ultimately, the question you need to ask yourself is, knowing your worth and that you are a son or daughter of God, can you recognize that the other person is a son or daughter of God as well? And be willing to love them enough to withhold that enabling from them, to set healthy boundaries, and to, in some ways, hurt them so that they'll get better. If you have to break someone's heart by leaving the situation, by refusing to be around them, do it. Because if they are willing to change and if they will change, then that behavior that you just engage in by separating yourself will help to motivate them. And I want to put a big emphasis on the time that this takes. Making these kind of changes in yourself and in your relationship and enforcing boundaries and hopefully supporting that person in making changes, facilitating their change, takes a lot of time. You'll need to be patient with yourself and patient with them. And if you've separated yourself, don't go back until they've proved a consistent long-term period of time that they're going to change. If you're staying in a situation and you're seeing that pattern of they're making those little changes, but then they're starting to slip back, remind them and enforce them and follow through on those consequences. Tell them, I am not allowing this cycle to continue. You will change or there will be consequences. You cannot keep them from the consequences, and by trying to do so, you are hurting them. In the Book of Mormon, Lehi, the father of Nephi, teaches his children that there cannot be righteousness without wickedness. There cannot be happiness without sorrow. There cannot be joy without pain. That person that you're enabling cannot be truly happy, and you cannot be truly happy together with them unless they are allowed to feel the consequences of their actions. So stand up for yourself and choose not to enable them. Now, real quick, I want to tie in some things from the textbook from my class, and into the family proclamation. We talked about mothers are primarily responsible for nurturing the children, and fathers are primarily responsible for providing and protecting. Does that mean that one or the other can't do either? No. Um, Both are capable of doing such, but our divine identity, as we talked about in the last video, as a son or daughter of God, carries with it traits that are inherent to our gender that we are more proficient at or that we are given the responsibility for. But we are to support one another in those things. A father um, should um, try in every chance that they can to be the provider. Um, Frequently, when we're talking about toxic relationships, the most common um, perpetrator of the toxicity is a toxic male with a female or a woman that is enabling. That's not always the case. There are many situations where the woman is toxic and the man is the enabler, but most common it's the man. And we talked about, taking on too much responsibility. If you find yourself doing all the housework, all the child rearing, um, that's not okay. You may be primarily responsible for the care and nurture of the children, but the father is not excused from that. A father is to partner with their spouse. It says that we are to be equal partners. From chapter 12 in this, um, 13 in this book, um, it talks about some of the key things that a father should be doing: to preside, to partner, to be present, and to provide and to protect. Um, One of the examples we used earlier was of constantly playing video games. If you're constantly playing video games and your mind is not in your home, you are not mentally present for your children or your spouse, um, and that's not okay. You need to be mentally present, whether you're the father or the mother. That is essential for you to be doing. Now, while the mother is the nurturer, that does not mean that she is solely responsible for caring for the children. Um, the father, part of protecting, is also setting healthy boundaries for children, preparing them for the outside world, and instilling in the child with the needed skills and knowledge um, for going out into the world, and teaching them. That's part of to provide them the correct knowledge and understanding that they need. And mothers are also in charge of protecting their children as well. A mother is most often the one that's at home with the children and has the time to teach them and has the opportunity for the lessons of life. But sometimes mothers are also the providers. My wife is our provider. She is a school teacher, and I'm stay-at-home dad with my kids. But I have fully recognized that I am not inherently as nurturing as my wife is. She is so much better at it than I am, and I rely on her when she comes home to be able to assist me with that. And I assist her with providing by helping her with grading papers and grading tests, coming up with lesson plans. It's an equal partnership. I am just as much invested and involved in her success at work as she is, and we are both just as invested as raising our children. I wanted to tie that in here at the end, um, and point you to this resource. I don't know how available this book is. I know that I have it online from my school, and I've mentioned it before, but I would highly recommend that you get and read this book if you can. It's called Successful Marriages and Families: Proclamation Principles and Research Perspectives. The more resources you have, the better enabled you will be to understand what enabling behavior is and also what good, appropriate support is like. So my challenge to you is to make a search about changing your enabling behaviors to supporting behaviors and see what you can find. I encourage you to read for yourself and click on the links embedded in the 3 articles that I used today, and I will link those in the description of the video. And I encourage you to go out and find this book and read it, because this is from whence a lot of my knowledge and a lot of what we're talking about is coming, because this book is specifically focused on applying the principles of the proclamation. It's not as focused on applying it to toxic relationships, um, but these principles are universal and apply to everyone. I have simply chosen, as this is an issue that's important to me, to focus on these things and helping individuals in toxic relationships. Now, this video has gotten rather long, um, and I've done a lot of talking, and I haven't given you a lot of time to think. So I encourage you to take some time to think. Um, don't move on to the next video until you've followed the commitment from this. And I would also encourage you to reach out to me. Leave a comment about what you learned. Leave a comment with the resources that you find so that others can benefit. I also encourage you to email me at my email for this channel, which is swordofthespirit94@gmail.com. Because I'd be more than happy to be able to talk with you and converse with you about what you're going through. I'm not an expert, but I would love to be, as I mentioned, part of your support group and your support system, the people who truly care about you and what you're going through and can give you needed perspective and insight. Thank you for watching. Have a fantastic day, um, and I will see you in the next video.